Greetings, programs. Welcome to episode 33. Why the future should be socialist and why you better hope we get it. So, this one's about the future and economics. Oh yes, and it includes that scary word for a lot of people, socialism. So, I have a few things to do here. First, I have to tell you what capitalism is, because if getting yelled at by people on the internet has taught me anything, a lot of folks, and by a lot of folks I mean Americans, think that capitalism is money, or trade, or freedom, or some other thing. And then I'm going to tell you what socialism is, and then I'm going to tell you why the future is socialist. Okay, so what is capitalism? Capitalism, noun, an economic and political system in which a country's trade and industry are controlled by private owners for profit rather than by the state. Notice that trade and industry are owned by or controlled by capitalists, not that capitalism is trade or industry. It's not making stuff. We made stuff before capitalism came on the scene. It's who owns the means to make the stuff, the factories, the tools, the mines, etc. See footnote number 1, An Intro to Marxism by Professor Richard Wolff. Wait, Marx? Isn't he Chairman Stalin Maduro of Soviet Venezuela who wants to fire lasers out of his mouth until all the whites are dead and all the grain is on fire? Why, no, imaginary interviewer. He's not. Check the link. But basically, Marx saw capitalism at work and figured that something was not right, and he wanted to know why. So he made a critique of capitalism, which is called Das Kapital. Basically, when capitalism took over from feudalism, much freedom and liberty was touted, and he noticed that it never arrived. Because instead of lords appointed by God, lording all the stuff and leaving scraps for everybody else, it was capitalists doing the same shtick, after they guillotined everybody who objected. And he thought that this was bad too. So, there's markets, there's trade, there's the means of production, factories and stuff. Feudalism is when lords and kings own it all. Capitalism is when private individuals that are not lords and kings own it all. Okay, so what is socialism, besides being bad, of course? Well, socialism is anything in a category of things, but the broadest view is that the means of production that I mentioned before, the factories, the farms, whatever, they would be owned by the people that work them ideally. And so that's either a co-op type thing, where each worker has a share and a vote, and a democratic say in what happens in the company, or the farm, or whatever. Usually, this is called democratic socialism. Not to be confused with social democracy, which is just usually a socially conscious version of capitalism, with good safety nets. Or, another form of socialism is that the whole country owns it, through the state. This is often called communism or something similar, so as to distinguish it. But socialism is bad, right? I mean, sure, workers owning the means of production, that sounds kind of cool, you get to be having a say in what goes on, but it never works, right? Well, that depends on how you define it. A lot of people think that socialism, in quotes, is when the state does stuff. And by that measure, most of Europe is socialist, and they are doing okay. But that is not workers owning the means of production. And so critics of socialism will be quick to tell you that France and Scandinavia as a whole and the UK and others are not socialists. But Venezuelans eat dogs and rats, right? And they are socialists. And what about Cuba and East Germany? Oh, and Stalin and Mao killed all those people, right? No. Venezuela has problems. For one, they are not socialists. 70% of their income is capitalist. They are capitalists. The leader just calls himself a socialist. But then Kim Jong-un calls himself a Democrat. So it's not what you call yourself that matters, but what you do. And Venezuela is as socialist as some of the European countries are. And they think they're capitalist. So, their problems are a mixture of corruption, bad management, bad luck, and outright economic warfare by the US, who are fairly notorious for this sort of thing worldwide. though oddly not in the US, strangely enough. See footnote number 2 for details about America's bad behaviour around the world. Why? Well, it's not complex really. Consider you want a job making furniture. Bear with me here. There are 2 factories that make furniture. One is a standing company owned by a capitalist or a corporation, as before. The other is a worker co-op, where each worker gets a vote in what happens with the direction of the company, what they make, and what happens with the money. Consider that the workers are not going to cut their own health benefits to save money. They are not going to make themselves work for minimum wage and unreasonable hours. They do not have a boss to run off with all the cash, take most of the millions, so they get solid pay. Now, given these 2 options, where are you going to want to work? Where are the capitalist workers going to want to work? And what are the owners of the capitalist furniture shop going to do when their workers start to leave to go next door to the much happier, better paid, nicer place to work? Well, they get a choice. They get to become like those people and thereby stop making massive profits, or they get rid of them. Which is why most capitalist countries have the most wars. And they sure are not going to say nice things about the other people, unless their own workers get ideas. More on that later. So that's a couple of variations on socialism, and a slight digression into why you probably think bad things about people called socialists. And those rich people, those owners that are not in favour of socialism, guess what? They own media companies. So, why is the future socialist? Well, the current capitalist system has a number of flaws. For one, it crashes every 4 to 7 years, and that's not good. And it dies completely every 30 years or so. That's worse. For examples, this sort of thing, consider the Great Depression, consider the Great Financial Crash of 2008, and there have been other smaller, less dramatic, but nonetheless painful crashes since then. Most easily exemplified by the United States. See footnote number 3 for all about economic reboots and crashes. But that's not the real problem. The real problem that I'm discussing here is the futurist problem. And that's the one that everyone knows and accepts. Capitalism puts greater and greater wealth in fewer and fewer hands. We all know this. It's not news. Currently, according to Oxfam, as of 2017, 8 people own as much wealth as half of the human race. See footnote number 4. This is a trend. In 2010, it took 388 people to equal that wealth. 7 years later, it's 8. Downward trends have an end. So what are we going to do when it's 1? What are we going to do when that one person uses their wealth to capture the rest? How will you fight a trillionaire? And it gets worse. Automation. See, right now, humans, people, you, still have labour value. What is going to happen when the factories can be run without people, for realsies? When the robots are more or less self-maintaining? When that trillionaire owns the factories? Well, that really depends on if they also own the factory that makes war robots, and how psychotic they are. See, at that point, it can only really go one of 2 ways. Either that person crowns himself king of the human race and becomes Robo-Hitler or Skynet, or we just turn away from them. See, here's the thing a lot of people forget about power and money. Big number on your bank sheet won't do you any good if nobody will do what you want. At the end of the day, money is just an agreement between 2 parties. I give you this number, you do this thing. And if the person you're trying to convince to do something for a number decides they don't want to, then all you've got is a number. And numbers cannot feed you. They cannot do things for you. Only if other people agree do they actually have any power. Now the question then becomes, this one person who owns everything, if they end up sending huge robot armies after us, why? Why would they do that? And what would they do? Let's say they send the robot armies and the robot armies win. Now what? They already own everything according to the books that they have. And we cannot buy anything, and probably don't want to. The only thing they can do is force everybody to live in poverty by destroying any attempt to build a different or other economy. They literally have to declare war on the human race for the sole purpose of keeping us poor, so as to make them relevant to us, because we are humanity and they are just some dude, forcing us at gunpoint to participate in their economy. Otherwise, we just turn our back. We make a new currency and we let them go play with their robots, because those numbers, they are not connected at all to what we are doing now. Just like if I come to you and I tell you I've made a new currency called Zorblies, and tell you, hey, here's a thing for 1 billion Zorblies, if you give me a pizza. You ask me, what can Zorblies be spent upon? And I tell you, nothing, you are the first person to interact with Zorblies. Oddly, then you probably don't want to give me a pizza. That is the endpoint of capitalism, the end of the trend, the reductio ad absurdum. The alternative is something else. Either socialism, or something like it with a different name. Why? Well, let's consider the same endpoint scenario of some other trend. Advanced manufacturing, technology, 3D printing, decentralized infrastructure. Where is that going to go? When more and more can be done by less and less, where does that trend end? What happens when we are at Star Trek levels of technology? When there are replicators all over the place? Scenario. Here is a big number. Go do that thing for me. What can I do with this number? You can buy stuff. Why do I buy stuff? I can just go to the replicator over there and make stuff. Clothes, a house, a car, whatever. And the thing is, they won't be able to put a stop to this. Tech will spring up pretty much everywhere at once when it does get invented. Replicators, nano goo, whatever it is. The thing that makes the things. And when you have one of the things you can get it to do is to make another one. If you try to control the supply of fuel, they can use their replicators to make the machines that make or mine or collect the fuel, whatever it is. And that's it. All over, no more economy, post-scarcity in like a year. Every town has a replicator. Or perhaps every house. Lots of clean energy. No more toil, no more farmland, no more factories. The closest thing we will have to an economy, art. And better designs for the things that we can make with our cool replicators. The means of production will be available to every town, or village, or family. And new things to build, new art, new style, new science, those will be valuable and scarce. And here's the thing. Even if the 1 trillionaire has better designs for his stuff, so what? They won't have them for long. First off, anybody who helps them make the cool designs will probably just leave and take the designs with them. And secondly, why would anybody work to earn their numbers to buy a slightly better version when there's a free version, or 1,000? And then you can go back to landscaping, or painting, or sport, or a community work project that your people are working on, or scientific research, or designing your own version of whatever. Seriously, you see this sort of thing all the time in modding communities for active game titles. Go look at the workshop page for the game Space Engineers. The game itself has some mods and some add-ons and some DLC that you can get. But nearly everything that you can buy is swamped by better stuff that has been freely available in the modding community for years, and designed and released for free by people who like doing stuff for the hell of it, or for the challenge, or for the respect of the community. But how will we feed everyone? Technology, and a lack of waste. Thanks to capitalism, we produce what sells, or what can be made to sell, not what we actually need as a society. And as much as 40% of it in terms of food is wasted by that process, as markets try to guess how much they can sell, and screw it up. Or waste it because it's cheaper not to bother feeding it to somebody than it is to actually just chuck it out. See footnote number 5. Food wastage due to capitalism. Yes, There is abundance already, right now, and we can have more. Not only can a lot of it be automated, but we also have the tech to do it very, very efficiently. We can even do it in the cities. Vertical farming is a thing, and it can feed vastly more people than a regular farm can. It's just more expensive right now, but that will change as tech advances and priorities are rebalanced. See footnote number 6 for vertical farming. Ooh, wow. And now for the last bit, anger. You will have noticed that if you say anything socialist leaning, or even just maybe, hey, maybe capitalism isn't great, that people will come out of the woodwork screaming all sorts of rubbish about 100 million dead, capitalism pulling people out of poverty. No. People and work pull people out of poverty, not ownership. And the 100 million dead? No, that's bogus. But why? Why are they so angry? Especially when they are not the 1%. With a vested interest in defending their own wealth. It would make sense if you were a billionaire to think that capitalism is awesome. Well, I don't know for certain, but I have a hypothesis. There are two parts. Firstly, Cold War propaganda was real. It was everywhere and terrifyingly effective. These people were either fed it from the time they were born, if they're old enough, or they got it from their parents if they weren't. This stuff is still everywhere in society. Society has absorbed it to the degree that it is not simply knowledge, it is simply the way things are. No, socialists did not kill more than the Nazis did. No, Stalin was not the monster they made him out to be. No, neither was Mao. Pol Pot might have been, I'm not really too sure when it comes to him. And no, every society that tries socialism or some variation of it does not suddenly fail. But there is a second part. Most of these people are not the 1%. 99% of them, in fact. And the 1% are not going to be commenting on forums or YouTube. They've got better things to do. Those people who are defending the system that takes most of the value of what they make are probably upset by any hint that other people should work less hard than they do for what they get. They worked hard to get where they are, damn it. Why should somebody else have it easy? That's envy. And there are biases at work, too. There's a variation of the sunk cost fallacy, where a person defends a choice or position that was costly because they can't bear the idea that it might have been a bad idea to do so, or that it was poor judgment. And people don't like that feeling. It does not match their self-image of a smart person who does not mess up. This is called cognitive dissonance. And this cognitive dissonance causes them to rationalize and defend their current position, as it is not something that can be changed. You cannot rewrite the past and not have ended up where you are now. See footnote number 6 for details on cognitive dissonance. And so, they rationalize to themselves that theirs was the best way. It must be, or they would be a foolish person. And they are definitely not a foolish person. See footnote number 7. The greater our investment, the greater the likelihood that we will hold on to ideas that don't serve us. And given that they invested their lives in the struggle, sacrificed, maybe even lost family, or broke up their families, all to get ahead, there can be no bigger threat than a system that means that other people don't have to, or that illustrates that whoever they were, they have been exploited all those years. And you can see this on any video in the comments about Bernie Sanders. Go watch a Bernie Sanders video. Even if you don't agree with his policies, just look in the comments and you will find somebody screaming their head off about how wonderful capitalism is and how awful socialism is, and none of it has any bearing on reality. I worked hard to get what I got. Why should some immigrant get looked after for free? As if somehow the hardness of the work changes the moral weight of what you ended up with. And these people never ask why it was that they were not the ones that were looked after. Why they had to pay huge costs for housing or medical care in a rich country. Because if they accepted that maybe the system could be better, then they might have to accept the loss of status that comes with acknowledging the fact that somebody took advantage of them. No one likes to feel that they not only were screwed, but they helped the person who screwed them. And so that's my hypothesis as to why this subject brings up so much anger from people who are being abused by the very system that they themselves are defending. So yes, the future is going to be socialist, or it's going to be a dystopian nightmare like Terminator. Except, Skynet is going to be controlled by one rich guy, who has to attack you to force you to pay attention to him. And somehow that's both worse and sad. So that's all for this week. Tune in next time for the ethics of mind control, or how refutations and rebuttals actually work, or something else. Bye for now.